Today we are going to take a look at Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Made Simple by Seth Gillihan. This is the highest I've ever scored a book. I actually read it last year, but as I was reading over the annotations for it to do a review, I just decided I wanted to reread it, so here we are. So, what this. I also think that the topic is pretty important, so perhaps that's biasing me towards having a higher score, but here we are. So, what this covers is cognitive behavioral therapy, and I think perhaps the easiest way to just sort of quickly explain it is that, so first of all, just take a look at the name. It's therapy, so it's an intervention. It is particularly effective at treating depression, OCD, panic, and anger. These have shown, like, the clinical data is that it's pretty good. Recidivism is really like low on depression relative to, I think, taking medication and other interventions. It's also pretty good for OCD, although I've heard mixed. Yeah, it's good for OCD, but I've heard mixed stories on the behavioral component for OCD. But, anyways, so the first aspect is you take a look at cognitive sort of stuff. So, what it does is, let's say you have a pair of glasses through which you view the world, right? And if those glasses are tinted red, you see the world in the shade of red. And you're just looking through these glasses, and you forget you're looking through the glasses. Okay? One way you can kind of tint the world is negatively. So you can just think, oh, this is terrible, like all the time. There are three, particularly the three P's, permanent, pervasive, and personal, that are particularly bad ways of explaining your life. I forget who it is, but created this idea of notion of explanatory style, where, let's say you do bad on a test, okay? And if you were going to, like, personalize that, you'd be like, oh, I'm so stupid. But, like, let's say it's a history test and you're just not very good at history and you're good at every other subject. Is it really true that you're, like, just stupid? It's like, no, you're just bad at history. So one thing we tend to do is we tend to personalize. So with cognitive behavioral therapy, what you do is it's a structured form of introspection which helps you take off the glasses and look at the glasses on how you might be coloring your life. So to continue on with the example of, like, doing poorly on a test, you're, like, taking it personal. Oh, I'm so stupid. It's like, oh, it's me that's stupid. Well, also the test could have been hard, right? Let's say you got a D, but everyone else got an F. Then the test was just really hard. Another element is pervasiveness, for example. If you do bad on the test, and you're like, oh, I'm a terrible person. Well, just because you do bad on a test doesn't mean you're a terrible person, right? The test only relates to the subject material it was testing. To think that it relates to other stuff, then it's just not an accurate way of thinking. But it's easy to automatically think in this sort of way and not even realize that we're doing it. And so by taking a look at the way we interpret life, it can help us to avoid going down self-defeating kind of circular type of logic. The third P is permanent. So, for example, you get a bad test, you're like, oh, I'm stupid, I'll always be stupid. And it's like, no, you can study. Okay, so a lot of what has to do with cognition is just having mechanisms for examining our own thoughts such that we can take a better look at them. Okay, the second one is behavioral. And so in the example of OCD, one intervention that's used is progressively desensitizing yourself by exposure therapy, but it's done in a progressive way to make it so that you can ratchet up slowly and slowly until you can get there. There are some studies that are done where it's not done progressively, and these seem to indicate that the intervention is not particularly effective if you do it, like, just full born. But if you do it progressively, research seems good for that being effective. So, for example, let's say you're afraid of driving on the freeway. The way you could ratchet this up is, first, you're just going to sit in your car with it parked, right? Very basic level. Once you feel comfortable doing that, You can take a drive around or just ride around the block with a friend driving. Then you could drive around the block with a friend or with a friend in the car. Then you can drive around the block by yourself. Then you can have a friend take you on the freeway. Notice how it's progressively getting closer and closer to the fear, but we're managing and locking in a certain level of comfort each time. There's a feedback loop between what you feel and think and what you do. And cognitive behavioral therapy is particularly attentive to the fact that there is this sort of looping effect. Your cognition affects your behavior, but your behavior affects your cognition. Here's another example from the book. Let's say you are invited out to eat, and you just have severe anxiety. Okay, there is if you just decline over the short term, it's easy to see how that actually feels like a reward to you because you avoid your social anxiety, and so when you decline, you immediately get a sense of relief. However, in the long term, what that behavior is going to do is it's just going to make you increasingly agoraphobic. And so what you should be doing is saying yes and going out. Obviously, if you want to go out, but that's kind of like a little circular in there. But the point is that your behavior is going to inform the way you feel as well. So oftentimes, just getting started on something is a really good way to bust up procrastination. Or just starting to walk a little bit will positively affect like other areas of your life as an intervention. It's like an incredibly easy intervention. The book doesn't go into great detail, but it does talk about stuff like sleep, nutrition, exercise, all as behavioral means to help positively affect your life. Okay. Now here's the third part about cognitive behavioral therapy that is not inside the name. This is a bit of a new addition to the cognitive behavioral therapy type of thing, but it is mindfulness. So mindfulness is just taking time. The best example is meditation. And what you are trying to do there is you are trying to kind of create a space in between yourself and your thoughts, and just kind of examine your thoughts and just be present in the immediate moment rather than perhaps like worrying and dwelling and that sort of thing. And so what meditation does is there's this Buddhist principle of responding to your environment rather than reacting to it, where there is this space in between your environment affecting you and you exhibiting a behavior. And what meditation does is it helps to create this space so that you can respond more resourcefully to things. There's a lot of research on meditation being effective for a lot of different things, but the research is relatively new, like the last 20 years. But it does look quite good, and there are other sorts of mindfulness things included in this book other than meditation. I just think meditation is the best example for just kind of explaining it. So put together, you kind of have various tools that the book puts forward. The book is very small and easy to read that can be used to try and actualize your values, I guess. But being particularly useful for busting up depression, anxiety, anger, that sort of stuff. And the clinical evidence is very clear that it is incredibly good intervention, even like relative to like talk therapy and that type of stuff. And what's I like about cognitive behavioral therapy is you function as your own therapist. Obviously, going to a therapist in tandem with this would be effective, but this allows you to, really, it gives you tools to use, I think is the best way to think. And you can just apply these tools, just mechanisms for, like, it has procedures for keeping like a journal, for examining your thoughts. Meditation is structured. Taking your behavior that you find a bit hard to approach and breaking it down to easier and easier steps as you do in the behavioral portion, that's a clear sort of directive that is easy to implement. All of the stuff in here is easy to implement and is straightforward and it's empirically validated. And so I'm just a huge fan of CBT in a general sense, as a means for, you know, if you go to the gym to be physically fit and you do physical exercise, why wouldn't you do mental exercise to be mentally fit? Anyways, let's get into the ratings. For utility, I gave it a 9.5. In terms of utility, I can't think of a book that I think if you've never been exposed to CBT, I don't know if there's a book I could recommend that I think would be more useful, unless you have a very specific problem. In which case, a book addressing that problem would be more useful. Just as a general out there sort of thing, this book's incredibly useful. Not only that, it is short. There's very little fluff. It's very easy to read. You know, it's high on efficiency and also high on substance. And so I gave it a 9.5. 9.5 is the highest rating I ever give anything because nothing's perfect. But with a caveat, I might be just biased towards CBD in general and just be, if I score every CBD book as a 9.5, then like it might not necessarily mean that this book specifically is like, you know, the bee's knees of CBT. Okay, so for a novelty, I gave it a 7.5. It's not like it's hard to find CBT, but I think that if you've never been exposed to it, you are missing something pretty substantive, and you should take a look, and take a look with an open mind. You know, it's easy to dismiss something as perhaps being wishy-washy, but one thing I like about CBT and the stuff that is empirically vetted is there's no the wishy-washiness is like it's not there because it's like it's empirically vetted. One thing I like, this is Dan Harris's book 10% Happier, where he advocates for meditation. He says hide the Zen, because a lot of people find the Zen like type stuff wishy-washy and less grounded. CBT is very well grounded, and where you could compare it to something like NLP, which just has like no research on it, and they like it's a form of mental exercise, NLP, but they just have like the craziest claims in books in general, where they just basically liken it to magic. Whereas like CBT is like, oh, there was this study and there were so many participants and like here were the results. And it's just like, instead of just taking like one exceptional case and holding it up as if it's representative. So empirically grounded, very straightforward way to improve your life that I think if you've never been exposed to it, you are missing out. So 7.5 on the novelty. It would have scored higher if I thought it was extremely hard to find like this type of information, but it's just not. It's in a lot of places, but still, 7.5. Entertainment, I gave it a 6. The book is straightforward. The author is a little bit funny, not too funny. There are these little vignettes of stories that help to illustrate his point. This is largely why I gave it a 6 instead of a 5, because the stories are a little bit entertaining and they make it more approachable and less dry. There are also just like a lot of like sidebar type things that I think make it just more engaging. This is why it scored higher on entertainment. But at the end of the day, it's still, you know, you're still just communicating information. It's a nonfiction book. It's not like this riveting page turner. So 6. For style, I gave it an 8.5. It is written in a very clear style, very easy to understand, tons of examples where I think they're appropriate, and also it is structured in a way where you can tell when an example is coming. So, for example, thinner paragraph and italicized if it's like doing a little vignette. You know, it's got like these side things, and you can, all in all, the style conveys the information very clearly and efficiently, and to that extent, the style is extremely good. The style is not good in the sense that you just like read and you're like, wow, this prose is incredible. It's not good in that sense, but it's good in the sense that it's trying to communicate information well, which I think is the intention of the author, not to be like, wow, that's like great prose. For readability, I gave it a 9.5. The book is gorgeous on the inside. You have various color schemes, sections that are easy to understand. This has got like a kind of a highlight color. Um, it's got these sorts of things like what a journal or whatever it's explaining there will look like. The book on the inside is gorgeous. It's structured in such a way that makes it really easy to read. I also am a huge fan of, this is going to seem a little bit nitpicky, but the paper is also really heavy paper that I like quite a lot, that is bound. Uh, Probably hard to see, but there's this little indentation. This is an expensive type of binding to do for your book. You see it quite a bit in chess books where you are expecting the book to be held open for an extended period of time. Although my binding looks like it's failing a little bit here, but I did read through it twice pretty quick. Um, the binding of the book seems high quality and expensive. The paper seems good. It's printed in multiple colors. It's sectioned out well. It looks well. It looks good. It looks well. It looks good. It reads well. And I don't think. I think the only other book I've given a 9.5 is the book on typography, which was in another world. Like it still would be significantly better than this, but this is extremely readable, extremely accessible. Um, Anyone can read this, especially because it has examples, and it clearly tells you, or it clearly shows when it's giving an example, such that if you didn't want to read the examples, you don't have to. Um, really like the readability, and for interest, I gave it a 7. I think these things are interesting, but nothing's perhaps crazy revolutionary, right? Like it talks about how sleep is good for you, and that's not as interesting as like reading something like briefer history of time where you're just like, wow, my mind's being blown. Like none of this seems necessarily mind blowing, but it is, I think, really important information to receive. And so this gives it an overall score of an 8, um, which I think is the highest I've ever put anything. As far as recommendations go, unless you already have just this huge exposure to CBT, I would recommend this book to everyone. This is the only book that I've given this hyper broad recommendation. And it's with a little asterisk because it's potentially the case that I just need to read more CBT books, and this isn't the best one ever in the history of ever. But in terms of books I've read that I'm set up to recommend to other people, I think this book scores higher than any other. I would recommend this broadly to everyone, specifically to people who are struggling with the kind of mental issues that this book or CBT. I keep on saying D, I think, or it's like easy. It rolls off the tongue easier. Uh, Anyone who's suffering from depression, anxiety, panic, or anger, I think that this book is a really good shout for them specifically. Like strong recommend, and then soft recommend to everyone in general. If someone has a recommendation as far as other CBT books go, more than happy to hear it, or have a discussion on individual exercises that you think you particularly like from CBT, or if you have some sort of problem that you want some help with and you think that someone in the comments or myself might be able to help with that. All right. If you like this, feel free to give it a like, comment, subscribe, that sort of stuff, the YouTube algo, and have a good one.